Hello everyone, for this video I thought we could do something fun, so I'm going to be talking about a collection of Symmetra buffs. Some I have seen on the forums, some I've thought of myself, and some were suggested to me via the comment section and my Discord. Before we start, I want to quickly tell you guys what I think are Symmetra's biggest problems. 1. Her teleporter is super clunky to use. 2. Symmetra's health is too low and she has no defensive options to alleviate this. 3. And lastly, Symmetra's level 1 charge is a cripple to the photon projector and makes a difficult weapon to use even more difficult. I will talk the specifics of the balance change and then add my own input. The changes will be in order of least drastic to most drastic. Keep in mind that numbers can always be changed, it's the principle that matters. Lastly, I tried to pick changes that fit with Symmetra as a character without reworking her. Hi guys, the video was a lot longer than I thought it would be, so I'm adding some timestamps to the description and the pinned comment. Enjoy. Level 1 charge damage increased to 90 DPS. This one is simple. It gives Symmetra's primary fire a bit of oomph to it right from the start. This will make some opponents think twice before jumping in uncharged Symmetra, as she will be able to deal more damage before ramping up. Range increased to 15 meters. Another simple one. This is actually the least drastic change that I am in favor with. I have stated that I would like the beam starting damage to be increased, but personally, I don't think Symmetra's damage and range should both be increased. It should be one or the other. A 15 meter range would mean Symmetra wouldn't have to put herself right smack in front of a tank to deal damage. It would also make her primary fire easier to aim, as it is typically easier to track movements at mid-range. Primary fire can penetrate players. Yet another fairly simple one. I'm honestly not sure if this would help Symm out a lot though. Maybe you would be able to pick off a healer hiding behind their tank. This would probably also make the beam much easier to charge in a team fight. Primary fire can pierce shields. Now this one I like. I'm not sure if the beam should do less damage when piercing a shield, but Symmetra's shield break isn't the best right now. So how do you make it better? Force your enemies to abandon the shield entirely. This change would make her matchup versus Winston a lot more in Symmetra's favor. Primary fire deals 25% extra damage to barriers. Pretty self-explanatory. At level 3 charge, Symmetra would be dealing 225 DPS to a barrier. You would be able to melt a Rhine shield in 8.8 seconds compared to the 11 seconds it takes with 180 DPS. 8.8 seconds is still long, but chances are your team will be aiding with shield break. Hopefully. Primary fire ramps up 25% faster on barriers. This would make the beam take 1.2 seconds to charge on a barrier as opposed to 1.6. It would take 2.4 seconds to fully charge as opposed to the 3.2 seconds currently. This change would definitely help solidify the idea of using an enemy's barrier against them. Ammo gained on barrier damage is increased to 10 a second. Currently, Symmetra's ammo gain is 7 a second on a barrier, meaning you have to attack that barrier for 10 whole seconds to get a full ammo refund. At 10 ammo a second, it would take 7 seconds to fully restore your ammo. Ammo is returned to 100. Honestly, why was this lowered in the first place? Primary fire's damage is changed to be 100 DPS at level 1, 140 DPS at level 2, and 180 DPS at level 3. This one is kinda similar to the 90 DPS on level 1, however this keeps the trend of having the beam scale by the same numerical increment. This time it would scale by 40. I wouldn't mind this change. Symmetra would actually deal more damage than Zarya at level 1, and having 20 extra DPS on level 2 isn't too shabby either. Dealing damage on players/barriers grants Symmetra temporary shields, capping at 100 extra. I like this idea a lot. This change would help to incentivize Symmetra into using her primary fire a lot more for a potential 300 HP. I think the shields should be decaying shields, just to avoid the problems of having extra health stacked up for an upcoming fight. Dealing damage on players/barriers heals Symmetra at 40 shields a second, very similar to the last one. This is like having an on-demand healer, however the heals only apply for your shield health. 40 shields a second isn't a lot, but a Reinhardt would have to commit an extra hammer swing to kill you, so that's good. Primary fire changed to function more similarly to Moira's, with a visual guide. This one I've seen suggested a lot. Just as an FYI, Moira does not have any form of lock-on. There is no such thing as a soft lock in Overwatch. Moira's Biotic Grasp has a very big hurt box, with a visual indicator to help the player aim. With Symmetra's range being so short though, I'm not sure if a visual indicator would help that much. A bigger hurt box would definitely help though. Primary fire reverted to its 2.0 state. One I've also seen pop up a lot. I have stated in my unpopular Overwatch opinions that I think the Noodle Beam would have worked fine on 3.0, and I still believe that. Symmetra is doing tickle damage for 2 seconds. Level 3 is the only charge level where you could do substantial damage. Symmetra's current primary fire feels like a dollar store Zarya beam, and a lot of people hate it because the old beam was unique. Also, people with disabilities would probably be able to play Symmetra again, and I'm all for it. Primary fire reverted to 1.0 state. Yes, I've actually seen this. Some people hate the current primary so much that they think the 1.0 beam would be better. In case you guys don't know, the 1.0 beam had a range of 5 meters. Yikes. As much as I dislike the Zarya beam, I'm gonna have to disagree on this one. Symmetra 1.0 was rough. Primary fire changes to a cone, hitting multiple people if they stand next to each other. This is an idea I had myself, and it's a bit tricky to explain, but I'll try my best. Basically, Symmetra's visual for the beam would be changed to mimic that of a cone. So the hurt box would start small at 0 meters and be expanded at 12 meters. Any enemies in this cone will take damage, kinda similar to Winston. However, I don't think this cone should be as forgiving as Winston's cone is. Primary fire changed to a mock flamethrower that will also deal damage over time after hitting an enemy. Try and picture a hard light version of Pyro from TF2. This would grant us a weapon we have not seen in Overwatch. Typically, flamethrowers pierce enemies and can be curved around to spray multiple people. I think the flamethrower should deal 75 DPS and leave a 2-second burn effect dealing 20 DPS. This would effectively give the weapon 95 DPS, which matches an uncharged Zarya. I'm not sure how the ramp-up mechanic would work on this one. To be honest, probably some numbers would have to be changed. Primary fire changed to a 3-orb burst fire mode, where the weapon ramps up based on hitting these orbs. This is actually a very recent idea that I had. What if we get rid of Symmetra's close-ranged attack altogether and gave her a really reliable long-range option? This weapon would fire a burst of 3 orbs, all firing about 0.5 seconds apart of each other. Hitting one orb will level up the weapon to level 2, and hitting the next will level it up to level 3. Damage will scale from 20 to 25 to 30, meaning if the weapon is uncharged and all orbs hit, the damage would be 75. 20 for the first orb, 25 for the second, and 30 for the third. If it max charged, the burst of orbs would deal 90 damage. I think the orbs should travel at the same speed as the Zen Orb, at 80 meters a second. This would also give Symmetra a new gun we haven't seen in Overwatch, and would easily alleviate her problems of dying easily in close range. Her secondary fire would still be an option to deal a big burst of damage to a tank. Or wait, wouldn't the primary deal more damage though? Maybe the secondary fire would have to be changed, I don't know. Health increased to 250. 125 health, 125 shields. Probably the buff idea I have seen the most on the forums in my comment section. More health equals less death. Pretty simple. Other close range heroes like Mei and Reaper have 250 health as well, and those characters have defensive options. Movement speed increased to match Genji and Tracer at 6 meters a second. I have seen this one floating around a little bit. The idea behind this one is to allow Symmetra some extra mobility when trying to use her primary. I don't think this will be the most helpful buff, but hey, I'll take anything I can get. Photon Shields. Symmetra and her allies in a 20-meter radius gain 25 shields. Believe it or not, but Photon Shields was once an ability on Symmetra 1.0, when I first started to play the character. The ability wasn't amazing, however there were some times where I knew I saved an ally because of the extra shields. I think this would be a very nice little passive for Symmetra. It would bump her health up to 225 and incentivize grouping up for her allies. Lightweight. If Symmetra doesn't attack for 3 seconds, her movement speed is increased by 25% at 6.8 meters a second. I honestly can't remember where I saw this idea, but I wanted to share it anyway. This passive would allow Symmetra to move faster when not attacking. Of course, it would be useful when walking back from spawn, however there isn't a lot of time in an Overwatch match where you're out of combat. I think this passive would have been more useful on Symmetra 2.0 as opposed to 3.0. Barrier Repair. Allied barriers within 10 meters of Symmetra regenerate 100 health a second. This one is an interesting idea. This would incentivize a Symmetra pick alongside a shield tank pick, very similar to how the synergy between Reinhardt and Zarya works. This would also buff Symmetra's ultimate, as it would gain health as well. However, let's be honest, Symmetra's ultimate usually expires before breaking. Shield Matrix. Whenever Symmetra deals damage, an aura is emitted around her, granting allies 5 temporary shields, capping at 50. This passive will have an internal cooldown of 0.75 seconds. So this is kind of the damage version of Brigitte's Inspire. Whenever Symmetra deals damage, an AoE will appear, granting her and allies temporary shields. This would definitely help with the lack of health problem. Not sure if this one would be overpowered or underpowered, as a team constantly gaining shields could pose as a problem. Symmetra can hold the orb for however long she pleases instead of being forced to fire after 1 second. This is one idea that I got from playing Amani and Paladins. Amani's Fire Stance primary fire is very similar to Symmetra's orbs. However, one of the biggest differences is that Amani can hold her fireball, very similar to holding a bow on Hanzo. So why not give that same function to Symm? Orb speed increased to 30 meters a second. This one I hear flying around a bit, and I have to agree. 30 meters a second is a tad slower than a Pharah rocket, if anyone is concerned. The orbs are pretty easy to avoid, and this would help alleviate that. Explosion radius increased to 4 meters. Oh yeah, the orbs have an explosion radius. Did you guys notice it? I haven't. Frankly, I don't think I've ever gotten a kill from the explosion radius since the rework came out. I actually just found out that the current explosion radius is 2 meters. What? That's not noticeable at all. Increasing the radius would allow for extra damage into groups, and would also aid in dealing damage with those orbs you just barely missed. Holding the orb for the maximum amount of time will make it pierce shields. Just to reiterate, this would pierce only shields and not players. This is to aid in those times where Orion is just sitting with his shield up, and his team is right behind him, where it is too dangerous to try and use your primary fire. This change wouldn't be too crazy, as you would only be releasing a shield-piercing orb once every 2 seconds. It's just to add a little pressure to those tanks. Secondary fire reverted to its 2.0 state. This one I've seen a bunch, but to be honest, I'm not in favor of it. In case you guys don't know, Symmetra's old orbs took 3 seconds to fully charge and moved much slower. However, they were unique in that they pierced shields. However, in my opinion, the 2.0 orbs were the biggest reason Symmetra 2.0 was a weak character. They were too slow and gave her no reliable mid to long range damage. Sorry guys, I miss 2.0 as well, but these orbs can stay in the past. Uncharged orbs move faster, slowing down the longer you charge it. This is actually an idea I've had from the 2.0 days. I still believe it could work on 3.0. Let's be honest with ourselves. Do we ever attack with uncharged orbs? No, and why should we? They deal less damage and move at the same speed as a charged orb. So I propose this change. An uncharged orb moves at 80 meters a second, the same as a Zen orb. The longer you hold the charge, the slower the orb moves. A fully charged orb would be the exact same as it is currently. This is to give Symm a little more poke battle. I believe uncharged orbs deal 25 damage, though I could be wrong, there's no info on the wiki about this. Hitting an orb applies a 10% slow to the enemy for 2 seconds. This allows Symmetra to more easily use her primary fire for a kill confirm after hitting a secondary shot. Holding an orb for the max amount of time will allow it to home in on enemies. Enemies need to be in line of sight for the home in to work. This is also an idea I've had from the 2.0 days. So holding an orb for the max amount of time will allow it to home in on an enemy you are looking at. No bonus damage, just easier to confirm damage. Much like the shield piercing orb idea from earlier, this would only be possible once every 2 seconds. Also, you would have to maintain line of sight with your opponent or else the orb will fly as normal. Orbs can block a small amount of damage. Very recently I just saw this idea in my comments section. I think the idea is that the orbs double function as a shield that can block a tiny amount of damage, let's say 50. My problem with this is that the orbs are way too fast to be used as a reliable shield. Also, if the orbs were shields, does that mean they can be destroyed? I'd rather not have the enemy destroying my main damage source. Make teleporters ignore guard railings. Okay, this isn't even a buff suggestion. This is more of a bug fix that should have been fixed when the rework was pushed to the PTR. Those damn fences can go to hell and rot. Teleporter always spawns at Symmetra's feet. No words needed, just look at this clip from an older video of mine. Unbelievable. Teleporter build time decreased to 1.5 seconds. Another one that isn't really a suggestion, but should be a must. The teleporter takes 2 seconds to go up, which doesn't sound like a lot, but shaving off 0.5 seconds to the deploy time could help make this ability viable. Teleporter interact radius increased to 3 meters. At the moment, I don't even know what the interact radius of the teleporter is. There's no info on it at all. All I know is that it's too frickin' small. You have to be pixel perfect on the teleporter to use it. 6 people, 2 of which are usually big tanks, have to clump into an extremely small space to use the teleporter. This will also fix the problem of, but I was on the teleporter, why didn't it work? Teleporter deploy range increased to 35 meters. Currently, the range of 25 feels pretty short. Using a teleporter to walk back from spawn is just slightly faster than walking. Increasing the range will also increase its potential greatly. Hanamura First Point is a great example. You can't TP straight to point from choke because the range is too short. Adding an extra 10 meters helps to alleviate this. Teleporter is infinite unless destroyed or recast. Another popular one from the forums. I'm definitely in favor of this. Think of Sombra's Translocator. Remember that awful feeling you had when you needed to escape a fight but the Translocator just expired? Yeah, that happens to Symmetra players on the daily. In all honesty, why is the teleporter not infinite? It already has a health bar. It can be destroyed by enemies. That's how you balance it. With the TP being infinite, you wouldn't have to go, I just missed it! Using a teleporter grants 25 temporary shields. Seen this one on the forums a tad bit. This is just a tiny little bonus for using a TP. Probably wouldn't help Symm's viability a ton, but it's nice to have. Symmetra can teleport to a place teleporter entrance without standing on an exit. You guys might have seen this on my recent poll because that's when I thought of it. Maybe when a TP is up, Symmetra's interact key is always active, or this could be bound to the jump button like Hanzo's leap. Okay, so picture this. You just teleported to the point with your team. The point fight initiates. A Winston jumps you, knocking you away from your teleporter exit. You use your interact key and spawn back at the entrance away from harm. I actually think this would be more of a new ability, but I decided to keep it in this section. This would 100% help with Symmetra's survivability, and you definitely wouldn't have to worry about not being close to your teleporter. Turret speed increased to 20 meters a second. Simple. Make the turrets match the speed of Symmetra's secondary fire. Turrets are indestructible in flight. Originally the devs said that the turrets weren't destructible in flight, but they obviously changed that. Having your turret die before even hitting the wall is horrible. This would also force enemies to most likely turn around to kill the turret, allowing Symmetra an opportunity for some mix-ups. Deploy time lowered to 0.8 seconds. This is a tiny nudge to the 1 second deploy time, nothing major. Cooldown reduced to 8 seconds. This idea I've actually stated right when the rework first came out. I personally think the turrets are fine, but 8 seconds is better than 10. Turret count increased to 4 at the cost of turrets stealing 40 DPS. This idea I've had from the How to Make Symmetra Better video. This would allow Symmetra more map control at the cost of a bit of damage. Turrets focus enemies targeted by Symmetra's Photon Projector. Honestly, I think this one should just be implemented. When playing Torbjorn, having your turret target the same person as you is a godsend. For Symmetra, it's so annoying when a group of turrets are all focusing different enemies. Imagine directing all that damage onto the enemy main tank, instead of having one turret spray them, while the other two are tagging different enemies. Enemies damaged by turrets are also crippled. This is also another idea I've had from the 2.0 days. The idea is that if you are taking damage from the turrets, you can't simply blink away to get away from them. Mobile characters will fear the turrets, and I think it's a fair CC effect. Just as an FYI, a cripple is kinda like Sombra's hack, but it only disables movement abilities. Cast time decreased. Honestly, the more I play with 3.0, the more I realize that our ultimate is fine. However, I think this one is a must. You can't reliably block a Rhine Shatter if you see it coming. something you could do on Symmetra 2.0. Many times you will die before the barrier even spawns. Having the deploy time be faster could help alleviate this. Symmetra can gain ultimate charge, capping at 50% while the ultimate is active. Seen this one on the forums a bit. Photon Barrier is being compared to Molten Core and Minefield. However, mines from Minefield are easy to destroy, and Torbjorn's ultimate takes much longer to charge up. I placed the cap of 50% myself, but I'm not sure if this one is OP. Usually when I barrier, I tend to go aggressive, so getting ult charge wouldn't be difficult. Allies who touch the barrier gain 75 temporary shields, similar to Doomfist. Although I don't think it's necessary, I'm still in favor of this idea. This would give Symmetra a mock shield generator, like I said in the How to Make Symmetra Better video. Allies who touch the barrier gain 30% movement speed for 3 seconds. I think I only saw this on the forums like once. This basically incentivizes allies to bob and weave around the barrier, and will help Symmetra herself in some matchups. Enemies who touch the barrier take 30 DPS. I still see this one pop up a lot on the forums, and to be honest, I'm not in favor of it. The barrier is already a huge hindrance to enemies, so punishing them even more for touching it would be overkill. Enemies who touch the barrier are slowed by 30% for 3 seconds. A little more in favor of this one. I think the enemies should only be able to get slowed once per barrier, instead of having the slow refresh by touching it. Still, I would prefer the barrier buffing allies as opposed to harming enemies. Photon Barrier returns as a third ability. Dare I say a must. This ability was Symmetra 2.0's bread and butter. It was so multi-dimensional, and you guys know I love multi-dimensional abilities in Overwatch. In any game, really. Your main tank under pressure to choke? Barrier. You want to engage on that enemy? Barrier. You want to block the Widow's sight for a few seconds? Barrier. Need to escape danger? Barrier. The list can go on and on. The old Photon Barrier wasn't the best at blocking huge damage numbers. However, it was amazing at blocking key enemy abilities and giving your allies a few extra seconds to take cover. I miss this ability so much, and I question whoever thought it was a good idea to get rid of it. Shield Generator returns as an alternative to the teleporter, granting allies 50 shields in a 30-meter radius for 10 seconds. This would function just like Moira's Biotic Orb. Are you on a map that doesn't favor the teleporter? Well, just use the Shield Gen as an alternative. The range might have to be tweaked down a bit, but I think this would be a fun ability and definitely useful. Shield Generator returns as a standalone ability, 30-second cooldown. Placing a Shield Generator grants allies 50 shields in a 30-meter radius until destroyed or recast. Seen this one on the forums a bit, and I liked it, but I think it's a tad overpowered. The Shield Generator used to be an ultimate, so having one at the start of the match could be troublesome. I tried to balance it by giving it the res cooldown and lowering the range and shield count, but who knows, Shield Gen might just have to stay in the past. Hard Light Boost. Symmetra gains a 30% speed boost for 5 seconds. Picture Torbjorn's Overload, but without a faster weapon. Much like Overload, this ability would be multi-purposeful. You could use it to engage an enemy, or to disengage and retreat. A 30% speed boost is the same as Lucio's passive speed boost, for your information. Shield Repair. Symmetra restores her shields at a rate of 50 a second, over 2 seconds. This would be an on-demand 100 heal for Symmetra. 50 health a second is the same as Mercy's heal. This would allow Symmetra a little bit of self-sustain in the brawl. Jump Pad. Symmetra can place a jump pad that will launch allies up 20 meters. One of my ideas from the 2.0 days. Pretty much an on-demand Oasis jump pad. Not sure how useful it will be since we have the teleporter now. Photon Clone. Symmetra constructs a hard light clone to fight beside her, and it will mimic Symmetra's usage of her photon projector. This clone will deal 50% less damage than Symmetra, and have 100 HP. So this is actually my most recent idea. Picture a light blue hologram of Symmetra standing to her left side. If you use your beam, she does as well. If you ramp up, so does she, etc, etc. The 50% less damage is to prevent 360 DPS melting a squishy in less than a second. With 50% less damage, the clone will deal 90 DPS at max charge. This is an offensive option for Symmetra, but I'm more in favor of giving Symmetra some defensive options. Hard Light Trap. Symmetra places a Hard Light Obelisk that slows enemies by 30% in an AoE, but also cripples them. It's Inara's Warder's Field from Paladins. We don't have a counter to movement abilities, so why not give it to Symmetra? This would provide a unique defensive option, as an enemy would most likely be unable to pursue Symmetra if caught in the cripple and slow. Photon Ramp. Symmetra constructs a hard-like ramp that allies can walk on for a short time. Again, not too crazy, but we have the teleporter now, so I'm not sure. Photon Overload. Symmetra charges her gun to its maximum power for 1 second. This gives Symmetra an on-demand level 3 charge. If she doesn't find a target in that 1 second window, then the ability will have been wasted. Honestly, I think this one is very overpowered. If you manage this ability well, there would be no excuses to not having max charge in every team fight. Maybe if it ramped to level 2 instead, it would be better? And that's all the ideas I have thought of and seen in circulation. If you guys have any more ideas, or thoughts on the ideas I presented, leave them in the comments and we could get a discussion going. The point of this video was to show that due to Symmetra's unique hero design, there's a ton of cool and unique buffs you could give to her. Yet the devs do nothing. The rework came to live 7 months ago, and Symmetra's pick rate hasn't changed. It got worse. Let that sink in for a bit. I'm YellowNinja, and as always, peace. This is to aid in those times where Ryan is just shitting